For those members, who have not yet taken the book, I would like to share with you that the book Treasured Memories is available at
Yeah,
Liberty Bookstall
yeah.
for 3,000 rupees in Karachi. But Excellency has given a special prize for members of English speaking union, and it's at 2,000. We have got 30 books, but anyone who wants to order now can give his name to Ashfaq, and we will make sure that the books get to us from Lahore, and we'll deliver to our members. And this, I tell you, having gone through the book, it's a book worth reading, and it's a book you would like to keep in your library for future reference also, because it is just not the memoirs, it is the history of Pakistan from 1947 onward. So I would strongly recommend that for those members who have not yet ordered, to order the book. Thank you. I'm on a Zoom meeting. I'll call you after that.
Aziz?
Yes, sir.
I'm having issues with my internet, so I've switched on both on my laptop as well as my phone.
Okay.
So
Okay.
because it's site Karachi, there's a lot of issues, I think.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So I'll keep.
We can start with the Tilawat, Majid. Majid, we can start with the Tilawat.
Maqsood is not trying to. He's not unmuting me, Okay.
Now we can hear you now.
Okay. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Welcome to English Speaking Union of Pakistan's Zoom session again this morning. For the first time, we're having it in the morning. We usually have it in the afternoon. We'll start off with the recitation from the Holy Quran. I don't see our favorite, so I will start myself. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك صدق الله العظيم. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are fortunate that we have with us Mr. Shahid Hamid, although he is former governor of Punjab and everything, but for us also, from the ESUP point of view, he is also the former president of our Lahore chapter, and he will speak on treasured memories. So without further ado, I will hand over to President Aziz Mehman for some house announcements and introduction of our chief guest speaker. Mr. President.
Thank you, Secretary General. A few in-house announcement. The International Public Service Public Competition IPSC will be held on 10th of May, Friday to 14th May. It will be a virtual event, and our participant would be Samir Ali Shahzad. He is of Lahore Grammar School in Islamabad. So we wish all the luck to Samir Ali Shahzad. For the speakers, next speaker, hopefully we will have on 6th of May, the Ambassador of Ireland, Sonia, Excellency Sonia McGuinness. At the time we'll let you know, we'll try to keep it in the afternoon. And then on the 20th of May, we have the Australian High Commissioner, Excellency Dr. Geoffrey Shaw. This is on 20th of May. And on the 31st of May, we have an in-person event at Beach Luxury Hotel. Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Amjad Niazi on 31st of May at 5 p.m. I hope by the time we have put COVID-19 on one side. So let's hope for the best. Now, Excellency Shahid Hamid Saab, who has been the governor of Punjab and who has written this book, Treasured Memories, is a known figure, known to all of us. And, you know, there are very few among us who have tried and tested the bureaucracy, the judiciary, and the elite. He started with 14 years career in bureaucracy. Later on, 40 years as a Supreme Court practicing lawyer expert on constitution. And he has also been a federal minister and governor of Punjab, rubbing shoulders with the Queen and the elite and the prime ministers. He will tell you more about it. So, and this book, you know, I would strongly recommend to all our members because it is just not his memories, but it is the history of Pakistan, giving insight of the military and the bureaucracy as it has unrolled from 1947 onward. To have a introduction of Excellency Shahid Hamid Saab, I'll request our NCEC member, Bakhtiar Naveed, to give an introduction because Bakhtiar knows Governor Shahid Hamid and his family personally also. So over to Bakhtiar.
Hello, everyone. When Mr. Aziz Mehman, President of the ESUP, asked me to introduce our guest speaker for today, I was delighted to learn it was my very own uncle I was being asked to honor. But it is not just family ties that make me admire Uncle Shahid Hamid. His illustrious career will be known to many among us. A graduate of Cambridge University, he has served as senior advocate in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, as governor of the Punjab, a noted civil servant, tireless philanthropist, and now author of a new book published to great acclaim, Treasured Memories. The book promises to allow the rest of us insight into Uncle Shahid's incredible life, working within the inner corners of Pakistani government. Everyone must read it, but for right now, we are lucky enough to be joined by the man himself and can hear his words directly. Uncle Shahid, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bakhtiar, for the introduction. May I request Mr. Moin Afzal first to give a talk on the book and then over to Shahid Hamid Sahab. Moin Afzal Sahab. Is he joined us? Moin Afzal Sahab, can we, are you unmuted? Are you online with us?
नो सर, ये नहीं है, मोइन साहब अभी ऑनलाइन नहीं हुए हैं। शायद
Moin
हम
Afzal.
अगर कॉल चली जाए उनके पास।
Shahid Sahab, would you, I don't have his number. Would you like to give him a call, Shahid Sahab?
Okay, I'll try that. But I don't want to delay you. If you want, I can start.
No, maybe if he is willing to join us, it will be a pleasure because we have already have him as a speaker who would be speaking on the
Aziz,
book.
I don't think he is here. He was there, but I probably he is either logged out or he has lost contact.
His number, Ashfaq Sahab, is
So maybe we can go ahead.
क्या मुझे दे दे नंबर मुझे दे दें
The number is 0301
yes
4071
yes
317.
I'll just make one attempt in 1 second, otherwise we request you to go ahead. Well, I have known him for a long time, but unfortunately I didn't have his number with me. And
जी सर,
He's not on WhatsApp.
forever अनम्यूट कर दे मजीद अजीज साहब को।
Oh, there he is.
बार अनम्यूट नहीं करो।
आगे मोइन अफजल साहब आगे
नहीं, मीर अब्दुल साहब से नहीं आया ना, अभी आप कॉल कर रहे हैं ना उनको।
मैं कर रहा हूँ
Ya Allah.
Hello.
जी हेलो मोइन अफजल साहब
Yes.
आप ज्वाइन करेंगे जूम मीटिंग
You have to unmute yourself.
अच्छा ओके यू हैव टू अनम्यूट योरसेल्फ एंड स्टार्ट स्पीकिंग
He wants to be unmuted. He was just on the line.
या मकसूद अनम्यूट कर दें अशफाक ना मोइन अफजल साहब को अनम्यूट करें अशफाक मकसूद
सर उनका किस नाम से, मोइन अफजल साहब किस नाम से हैं? वो अभी
ये आगे देखो स्क्रीन पर
Can you hear me?
yes we can hear you sir iPad
I could see you all along. I was sort of muted, you see, so I
Sorry,
couldn't get
sorry.
through.
sorry
Anyway, I'm on. So, Ms. Memon, would you like me to start?
yes sir please start
सर वो आप खुद अनम्यूट करें सर, वो कह रहा है।
हो गया अशफाक keep quiet now
Okay.
बोल रहे हैं।
Well, Mr. Aziz Memon, ladies and gentlemen of the English Speaking Union, thank you very much for giving me some time to speak about Shahid and his book. I'll take about 10 to 12 minutes. So I'll start straight away because we are a little late. Well, Shahid and I have known each other since 1960, when he was an undergraduate at Emmanuel College in Cambridge, and I one at Corpus Christi and Oxford. We would meet periodically on social occasions. A mutual friend who made this possible was the late Irfan Majid, who was up at St. Catherine's in Cambridge and had been with me at Aitchison College. Later, as civil service probationers in
Aziz,
1960,
can you hear us?
yes we can hear you Majid why are you आप म्यूट कर लो ना अपने आप को मजीद मोइन साहब go ahead please sorry
from 1964, as civil service probationers in Lahore, Shahid and I were to become good friends. And one aspect of Shahid's personality, which came to be appreciated by all at the Civil Service Academy, was his undoubted intellectual ability and capacity for hard work. Another was his interest in extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities, whether it was bridge, cricket, tennis, dancing, basketball, or poker. Shahid was always interested. Then there was his wit and humor. Aspects of this recur in his book, and this is a unique trait in his personality. Even in very tense and trying circumstances, he has never been unable to see the funny side of things. Shahid and I met often during our service in East Pakistan. Apart from monthly weekends in Dhaka, we would travel long distances from our subdivisions to stay at the newly functional Intercontinental Hotel. We had occasional meetings on the mighty Meghna River in our respective motor launches. He coming as additional deputy commissioner from Kumela, and I as his counterpart from Dhaka. Then one fine day in late 1969, we were both to join as deputy secretaries in the West Pakistan Finance Department in Lahore under the iron regime of Mr. I.A. Imtiazi, little suspecting what was in store for us. Shahid gives a flavor of this in a memorable chapter in his book. I say all this at the start of my talk today to record that my impressions are likely to have a bias, cemented both by our 60 years of friendship, as well as by numerous mutual experiences. Shahid, in the preface to Treasured Memories, gives his reason for writing the book. With time to spare in the early days of COVID, he asked himself the following question: what do my grandchildren know about me and the half-century of events since the birth of Pakistan? Very little was his conclusion. Just as decades down the road, he recalls little about the times his grandparents and elders lived, what were the challenges they faced, what were their achievements and failures, and what, if any, role did they have to play in shaping history or events in their times. In Treasured Memories, Shahid gives a thrilling account of his childhood, his culture, his education, his family, and his very extensive travels, all of which undoubtedly helped to shape his cultured personality. His public and professional careers enabled him to meet and interact with many eminent personalities and to play a part in historic events. Shahid recounts all this in a book which is entertaining and easy to read. I started reading it one night at about 9 p.m. Next morning, Nigat, my wife, asked me how far I'd gone. I said that I had finished it a little after 3 in the morning. I could not put it down, so I recommend it strongly to all. Shahid was a brilliant student from the beginning, starting from his precocious achievements at the Karachi Grammar School. He continued to have success after success in academic life. He made it to the top of Aldenham, his public school in England. At Emmanuel College, Cambridge, he was disappointed at narrowly missing a first, and then qualified in record time as a barrister from the Inner Temple. At the Civil Service Academy, which attracted some of the outstanding students from all over Pakistan in those days, he immediately stood out as one of the very best. He was a high-flying civil servant until his fortuitous premature exit in 1978. Deciding to leave the civil service was not an easy decision, but he took it. A little later, when Prime Minister Bhutto offered to take him back, he resisted the temptation. Again, a difficult decision. In legal practice, he could have worked in a legal firm or as a junior lawyer with an established advocate, but he had the confidence to start out on his own and to lay the foundations for a prosperous legal entity, Hamid Law Associates, where he was soon to be joined by his equally bright brother Zahid. Treasured Memories covers his entire life from childhood to the present day. His active life from, say, the age of 10 would total nearly 70 years. The book itself, including some very memorable photographs, is about 280 pages. Although the book attempts to record his memories throughout his eventful life, including extensive travels in different parts of the world, inevitably a major part of it records his life in public service, first as a civil servant, and later in association with Farooq Laghari as an informal legal advisor, as a federal minister, as well as governor of the Punjab. The part he played in public life, starting from the position of a sub-divisional officer in Shahid, as well as Gopalganj in East Pakistan, to being the de facto Prime Minister of Pakistan, was less than 1/3 of his active life. But in the book, this 1/3 takes up more than 2/3 of the written part of the book. Therefore, it is this part of the book I propose to introduce to you today. And since my time is limited, I will discuss just a few aspects of this most intriguing account of public service in Pakistan. Shahid, after a few years of legal practice, established a well-earned reputation for excelling in almost every aspect of law. But it was as a constitutional lawyer, as Mr. Memon mentioned, that he is perhaps best remembered today. Looking at his political career, one can legitimately ask which side of constitutional law does he stand today? Is he for a totally democratic dispensation as per the letter of the Constitution of Pakistan, or does he adhere to its spirit as tempered by precedents and convention? Some might say that he stands for the letter of the Constitution, but I would say no. Instead, I would call him a pragmatist. Let me give you my reasons based on his candid account of the happenings in his times. From the beginning of his being defense minister, while he stood by his rights and prerogatives under the Constitution, he was careful to keep on the right side of General Karamat, the army chief. When he felt that there was a lack of trust between General Karamat and himself, he made a point to clarify and remove the misunderstandings. When Farooq Laghari, before that fateful meeting with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in Choti, indicated to him that he was committed to the abolition of Article 53(2)(b, the only question that Shahid asked him was whether he had consulted with General Karamat before coming to his decision. President Laghari apparently had not. Finally, there's an interesting account on pages 182 to 183 as to whether the caretaker government of Miraj Khalid should have extended its life in order to carry out some essential reforms and to have the general elections conducted only after the completion of the much overdue population census. There was intense lobbying by many for an extension in the life of the interim government, not least by the redoubtable governor of the Punjab, Tariq Rahim. Shahid had indications both from the Supreme Court as well as from the GHQ that they would support the extension. Shahid gives his reasons in the book for not agreeing to this for purely practical reasons and not for the sake necessarily of constitutional niceties. His reasons were that the federal and provincial governments did not have the competence to introduce structural reforms, and that in any case, the IMF and the World Bank had clearly indicated that they would extend financial support to Pakistan only when an elected government was at the helm of affairs. His advice to the president to hold elections on schedule was based on pragmatic considerations. In my view, Shahid understood very well the dynamics of Pakistan's political evolution and knew with clarity that the armed forces had a role to play in Pakistan's politics. Moving without their tacit consent and without consultation was inviting a grave risk. This perhaps was a lesson that Nawaz Sharif failed to take in, despite his three strengths as Prime Minister. In recounting events in public life, Shahid is very matter-of-fact in his book. He recalls incidents accurately, but very rarely analyzes those. He refrains from passing value judgments on the rights and wrongs of any momentous decision taken. One memorable occasion which involved me is narrated at pages 234, 235. This relates to the period in May 1998 when India conducted its nuclear tests. There was a lull for some time, and the question was whether Pakistan would follow suit. Ultimately, Pakistan went on to conduct 5 tests on 28th May. Opinion was divided on whether it was in Pakistan's interest to have done this. As Finance Secretary sitting precariously on our very limited foreign exchange reserves, I seriously believe that we had to sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I seriously believe that if we had to conduct nuclear tests at all, it should have been at a time of our choosing rather than as a tit-for-tat reaction to India. I met Shahid in the governor's house around 20th May in Lahore and requested him to arrange a one-on-one meeting with the PM. My reasons, and I explained these to him, were: one, it was a well-documented fact that Pakistan had been successful in achieving nuclear capability. This was well known to India. We had nothing to prove. Two, unlike India, Pakistan had barely enough foreign reserves to cater for a fortnight or so of imports. Three, it was expected that nuclear tests would invite economic sanctions, which Pakistan would be unable to sustain. As a consequence, sanctions, which would also involve drying up of multilateral aid flows, would leave us no option but to default on our foreign exchange obligations, leading to the freezing of foreign currency accounts. Pakistan had never in history defaulted up to this point of time. Not only would the sanctions and consequent default shake the confidence of foreign investors, but it would lead to hardships involving high inflation and shortage of essential consumer goods. The government would find it difficult to survive. Shahid records that he asked me if the finance minister supported my viewpoint. I told him that Sartaj Aziz Sahib had yet to express his views, and it was for this reason that I wanted to explain the consequences personally to the PM. Shahid notes in his book, and I quote, I repeated all this to Nawaz Sharif when he came to Lahore, and he said, Moin is right in his analysis, but in my view, there is no alternative to paying the price of ensuring our freedom from Indian hegemony. Today, so many years later, with the hindsight of history, one can make up one's mind whether Pakistan took the correct decision in its long-term interests or not. The alternatives in May 1998 were either not to test at all on the lines of Israel's policy, or to reap the immediate advantages of not testing to strengthen our reserves as well as the economy, and to test later at a time of our own choosing. But above all, my concern at the time was the government's decision-making on issues of strategic importance needed to be done on an institutionalized basis and on the basis of reliable analysis, with all players sitting around the table. It was after the nuclear explosion and after the freezing of the foreign currency accounts that I had, as Finance Secretary, some interaction with GHQ to apprise them of the inevitable need of tightening our belt as far as foreign defense expenses were concerned. It was then that I sensed that they had not been properly briefed on the consequences of sanctions and default. My sense was that they might have had a different stance on the advisability of testing immediately had they been fully apprised of the consequences. I relate this particular instance as an example of the many questions that arise on so many cases of importance recorded by Shahid Hamid in his book. One is left wondering whether it might have been better if Shahid had himself analyzed these issues in his book. And then I'm reminded that Shahid's primary objective in writing this book was to leave a full record of his very eventful life rather than to analyze great personalities and events. Perhaps we should wait for Shahid's next book, which will go on to comment and analyze historic events of which he was a part, rather than just leaving a record for posterity.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Should I stop here?
Yeah, because we need to give time to our guests also, if it is all right with you. Thank you very much. Before I hand over to Shahid Hamid Saab, may I recall that 16 years back, you were at my house. We had a fundraising dinner for Beacon House University, and you had come with Mr. and Mrs. Kasuri, and we raised 60 lakh rupees that night.
Yes, I remember that.
And you are more than welcome again. So over this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Shahid Hamid Saab, over to you, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected Aziz Memon Saab, President of the English-Speaking Union, distinguished office bearers, members and guests of the ESU, I'm thankful to all of you for this privilege of encouraging my first venture in this new profession of writing a book. And Moin has already described to you the reason why I got into this. Of course, what happened was that I had always planned to retire at some time or the other. And the retirement was, in a sense, forced on me by my three daughters when they came to me last year, about this time last year, and said, Kiaba, I think you should go home and remain there with our mother. And then, with nothing much to do, I started looking at the albums, and memories came flooding back. There's nothing like looking at pictures to jog one's memory. And as Moin mentioned, I started thinking, what do my grandchildren know about me? And for that matter, what do even my daughters know about me? And this is perhaps a question that some of you who are my age or approaching my age may well ask yourselves, and be encouraged to write your own memoirs of events that you have seen in your younger days. Let me start by saying that the last chapter in my book is titled The Lengthening Summer, not the lengthening winter, nor for that matter, the lengthening autumn, the lengthening summer. And this to dispel any impression that looking at my gray hair, you might think I'm getting old. That's just not so. I do admit a little reluctantly to the fact that time marches on, and since, as it happens, I am 6 years older than Pakistan, I may have reached advanced middle age. And my memories are, of course, not just from the birth of Pakistan, but in fact, even 1 or 2 years earlier. And the very first memory, which I record and on the first page of my book, my father at that time was posted, he was an army officer. He was posted at the time in Calcutta at the end of the Second World War, where he had seen action on the Burma front. And there was a function in which the founder of our nation was the chief guest. And I was taken along to that function, and along with a little girl of my age, who, as it happens, was the younger sister of Naseem Mirza, ex-chairman ICI. The two of us presented a bouquet to the Qaid. That was the first of treasured memories, a year or so before the birth of Pakistan. Now, as Moin said, this book covers 3 generations. And I just want to give you a flavor of some of these memories. The first are of life in Karachi. My father was the first Pakistani military secretary to the Governor General. And Moin spoke about civil-military relations. And he recounted to me the events in 1953, when, as military secretary, he was asked by the then Governor General Ghulam Muhammad to call Khwaja Nazimuddin, the Prime Minister, and his cabinet for a meeting in Governor General's house. And when they came, Ghulam Muhammad said to Khwaja Nazimuddin, I want your resignation. And Khwaja Sahib said, why on earth should I resign? And Ghulam Muhammad terminated the meeting by saying, all right, in that case, you're dismissed, and walked out. And that action was sustained. Many reasons why it was sustained. But one reason why it was sustained is that at that very moment, the Army Chief, General Ayub Khan, and the Defense Secretary, Major General Iskandar Mirza, later President of Pakistan, were both sitting in the room of the military secretary. And then, as you know, in your history, you read about prime ministers changing one after the other. Yes, they did change one after the other until the imposition of martial law in 1958. But one constant in those cabinet changes was that Ayub Khan was the defense minister. And in fact, for a short while, also the interior minister. So the civil-military equation changed irreversibly, not in 1958, about 5 years earlier. But let me say a word or two about the Karachi of those days. It was a population of about 500,000, 600,000, small town, overgrown town, you could say. And my father was seconded into the Foreign Service in 1954. And we lived for a time in a house just opposite Maharta Palace in Clifton. And Clifton was an island. There was a long, narrow, winding road that from the main part of the city to Clifton. And at high tide, there were culverts under this road. And at high tide, there was seawater on either side of the road. And Clifton, Karachi was of course a lively city, but nothing like the megalopolis that it is today. It has grown, I think, from that time till today, 60 times. I don't know what the population of Karachi is now, probably something like 24 million. I was in Karachi Grammar School. Half of my class were Anglo-Indians. The vast majority of teachers were Anglo-Indians. All of them have left. They've gone to Australia, they've gone to Canada, they've gone to England. The Anglo-Indian community has actually more or less vanished from Karachi. As for that matter, has most of the Parsi community, they've also gone. One or two memories. One relates to you, Bakhtiar. Your father was a favorite cousin of ours and much admired. And the reason being that he was a bodybuilder. Did you know that? He was really a model bodybuilder in those days. And mashallah, very, very fit indeed, as he continues to be in good health by the grace of God. And I had my mamu, my eldest mamu, he had 7 daughters. And whenever I lived with them, the house was, of course, full of girls. And I met some of them. And one particular meeting I remember because as evening came, my mamu asked, please walk them home. So I said, all right. They lived not too far away. And the 3 or 4 sisters whom I had to walk home included Maheen, the great fashion designer. And as we left the house, they all grabbed my hand and they said, we want to hold your hand because we'll feel safer that way. I mean, that was, of course, done very deliberately to embarrass me. And as I recorded in my book, they did embarrass me, but only at the beginning. And may I just add that Maheen has been, for my wife and myself, one of our favorite friends from that time. I was in, when my father was posted in 1957 to London, I was put into Aldenham Public School, and I've given a detailed account of that public school. For some reason, the British call their private schools public schools. And why I want to mention this is that though I had a wonderful time in Aldenham Public School, and the education that I got from them was good enough to secure me admission later in Cambridge University. But I want to mention this from another point of view, and that is the very current issue. In fact, issue that has been in the news at one time or another throughout the last 50, 60 years, and that is the British elite racist? And I can only tell you from my own experience that in the first term of the 2.5 years that I spent there, the first thing I learned when I got there was that I was a WOG, W-O-G, WOG. What does WOG mean? WOG was a worthless Oriental gutter snipe. And it took the whole of that first term where I was able to show them on the playing fields and in academics that I was as good, if not better, than them, that they reluctantly admitted that I remained a WOG, but I had risen, elevated to the status of a wily Oriental gentleman. At that time, and in university later, with friends, I traveled all across Western Europe. And would you believe you could travel the whole length and breadth of Western Europe without a visa? No visa, except for Switzerland. And I was with a friend in Copenhagen when we realized that we can't go to Switzerland without a visa. And late at night, I rang up the counselor of the embassy. He took my call at that time and said, no problem, come tomorrow morning, and within 10 minutes, you'll have your visa. Quite unbelievable now. There was an international youth conference in Copenhagen. Some of my friends were taken to an island off the Danish coast to a girls' school there. And the girls were fascinated and insisted on coming up and touching the hair of my friends. Why? Because they had never seen boys with black hair. This was Europe of 50, 60 years ago. How very, very different both Britain and Europe is today. Years in East Pakistan. In 1967, the government decided to revive the system of interwing transfers. Moin, myself, Farooq Lagari, later, of course, President of Pakistan, we were amongst the first 7 officers to be sent across for 2 years to serve in East Pakistan. I was posted to a place called Gopalganj. It was a small, overgrown town, 11,000 people, no running water, no electricity, completely riverine area. Gopalganj had no roads. It was 3 hours by launch from the nearest roadhead. In the flood season, all the villages, the abadis in that entire subdivision, were built on mounds or small hillocks about 15 to 20 feet above the surrounding fields. Reason, during the floods, the waters climbed and climbed and climbed until they were lapping the village boundaries. And the entire area became an inland sea. And the almond rice crop, which was the staple diet, that increased in height along with the flood waters. But if it was overtopped by 24 hours, it died. And that happened 3 years out of 4. And then, of course, including the year that I was there, we had to import PL 480 wheat and feed them wheat. And of course, that caused completely different problems, because for people who were used to rice, a diet of rice, to switch to atta necessarily caused them a lot of problems in their stomachs and intestines. But Gopalganj was also mentioned by me in my book for the reason that it had a village called Tungipara. And Tungipara was the home subdivision of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was an under trial prisoner at the time in Agartala. And he was given 24 hours parole, and I was his civilian escort. And I was with him for 24 hours And I mentioned this, and of course, as to what we discussed and what happened, you'll can read about it if you like in the book. But later it was in the Planning and Development Department, where I was there for about 5-6 months, that I had a true appreciation of the grievances of East Pakistan and what led to the 6-point program and eventually to the separation of the East from the West. What they said was, look, our population is 55 million. Yours is 45 million, the whole of West Pakistan. But when it comes to the development budget, you say it's 50-50. Then huge expenditures are being incurred on the Indus Basin replacement works, the Rubela Dam, Mangla Dam, all the link canals. And you say that these are replacement works, so you put them outside the development budget. What about our flood protection works? Those are part of the development budget. Why can't our flood protection works be also kept outside? The bulk of military expenditures, 95%, are in West Pakistan. And we asked after 1965, what if India had attacked in East Pakistan? Who would have defended us? And your answer is the defense of the East lies in the West. And all the military expenditures take place in West Pakistan. There's no countervailing expenditure. Foreign exchange, 80% of the foreign exchange earnings are from the export of jute. And those 80% are spent on imports of West Pakistan. So there were a lot of grievances. And unfortunately, there was also not much empathy between the armed forces stationed in Comilla, in Rajshahi, in various other parts of East Pakistan with the local population. They kept themselves completely separate, mostly officered and manned by West Pakistanis. So in a sense, that parting of the ways was inevitable. The tragedy is it took place in such a violent manner, but that's what it is. And would you believe that when it did take place, there were people in West Pakistan who said good riddance, they're a basket case. And they quoted amongst others Henry Kissinger, that he's called them a basket case. And where are we today? Well, where we are today is that our GDP is $280 billion. Theirs is $320 billion. Our per capita income is $1,285. Their per capita income is $2,000, 50% more than us. Their foreign exchange earnings are 50% more than our foreign exchange earnings. And why? How has this happened? Well, amazingly enough, it's population more than anything else. What is the factor? But population. Today, the population of West Pakistan is 220, 230 million. Of East Pakistan, Bangladesh, 165 million. The family planning program that was started in Ayub Khan's time in the 60s was maintained by them. Ours was dismantled during the era of Ziaul Haq, and we never got it put it together again effectively. There, they managed to enlist the aid of their ulama in the program. We've never been able to do that. And I think more importantly, they empowered their rural women through Grameen Bank, through small loans, into their economy much more effectively than we have been able to do. We have also done a lot for women empowerment, but nothing on the scale of the Bangladeshis. And over a period of 50, 60 years, this is where they've got to, this is where we have got to. Let me go on. When I got back from East Pakistan, Moin, of course, had got married earlier, as had Farooq Lagari. But immediately after I got back from East Pakistan, I was married also. It took a couple of meetings between me and my wife, and the grace of God, we've now celebrated 51 years of marriage. She smiled, I smiled, and I told my mother, please go and propose immediately. But behind this lies a story, and that story is that when I was one of my father's very good friends was Mr. S.K. Delvi, the foreign secretary, later the foreign secretary in Pakistan. And his son was Said Delvi, who was in Oxford along with Moin, was, of course, also a batchmate in the 1964 batch. He was in the Foreign Service and later served as president of the Aga Khan Foundation here in Pakistan after retirement. Uncle Delvi was posted in Rome, and he invited me to spend a winter holiday with him. And one evening he sat me down and he said, you're getting to the age where shortly your mother will start showing girls to you, the intention that you should one or the other of them. But when she does, insist on saying their mother. I said, why, uncle? And he said, because when they are in their teens or in their early 20s, they all look very pretty, very beautiful. But 20, 25 years down the line, they look like their mother. So why it took me so quickly to decide that I wanted to marry Sarvat was, amongst other reasons, the fact that 2 years earlier, I had met Sarvat's mother, who was in her time the most beautiful woman of her times. Let me go on to events of the Benazir Bhutto period, during which the second government, during which, of course, I was the unofficial legal advisor to President Farouk. And the differences developed over appointment of judges to the superior courts. She had made, unfortunately, some appointments that were not really fully deserved. And in the famous Al-Jihad Trust case, the Supreme Court decided, amongst other things, that these would have to be reversed. And some of the people who had not been confirmed, some judges that had not been confirmed, had to be confirmed, notwithstanding the fact that they may have had connections with the Muslim League in the days before their revocation. And she was very upset about this. The Chief Justice was Sajjad Ali Shah. She called on the president, who then called me and said that the Prime Minister has come. This was, of course, before differences between them on this issue and other issues became irreconcilable. And he said that she's come and she wants a message to be conveyed to Sajjad Ali Shah through you, that she appointed him as Chief Justice, notwithstanding the fact that he was not the senior most. She superseded two others and still appointed him as Chief Justice. So you are to go and tell him this, that she appointed him and he is taking decisions against her. I was horrified. I said, good heavens, why me? What have I done that I should take a message like this to the Chief Justice of Pakistan? I hardly know him. And why doesn't she send the Attorney General to take this message? Better still, why doesn't she comply with the judgment of the Supreme Court? So he said, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to do this. He will not doubt the fact that a message like this has come from Benazir, because he knows the relationship between you and me. So with a bit of a sinking heart, I sought time from the Chief Justice of Pakistan, wondering what to say. And as I went into the room, inspiration came. And I said, my lord, I know that you're a student of history, and I'm sure you would know that you're not allowed to shoot the messenger. So he looked at me and he started laughing. He said, all right, sit down, have a cup of tea. And then while I was having the cup of tea, he said, what is the message? So I gave him the message. Then his face grew quite a bit stern. And he said, okay, finish your tea. And after you finished your tea, go and tell your president to tell his prime minister that she has appointed the Chief Justice of Pakistan and not her Khansama. Now, this really, I'm telling the story because it applies to quite a few other things, in particular to the appointments of Chief of Army Staff. The prime ministers of the day, and this applies to all of them, they're always looking for appointing someone that they know, someone who has put in a bit of safarish to them, someone who is related to some minister or the other, or have other connections with. Complete mistake. This is what I told Mia Nawaz Sharif also when I had something to do with this matter. I told him, look, it doesn't matter at all who appoints the Chief of Army Staff. The President can appoint the Chief of Army Staff. The Prime Minister can appoint the Chief of Army Staff. The President can appoint him in consultation with you. But once he is appointed, he is the head of an institutional power, and then he is not beholden one little bit to whom may have appointed him. And unfortunately, this is a lesson that has escaped all of them. I go on, and as law minister of the Federation, under my watch, as many as 51 ordinances were passed. This was a record in the time available for any government, and I'm proud to say that 70% of these ordinances, which incidentally also related to the tax laws and to the autonomy of the of various institutions, they were converted into permanent acts by the incoming parliament. And one law I'm particularly proud of is the Right to Information Law. That was the first Right to Information Law that was passed at that time. And one of the people who greatly assisted me in that task was Mr. Javed Jabbar. Incidentally, when we were passing this law, I called a meeting of all the federal secretaries and said, what do you think about it? And they all said, wonderful, wonderful. It's great. It should be passed, except we have reservations about its application to our own division. So they were all in favor of the Right to Information Law, except insofar as it related to their own ministry or their own division. The relations with the Chief of Army Staff, I'd like to tell a small story about that. One is that during that time, we formed the Council of Defense and National Security, which is much like the National Security Council that has finally been established. Only difference being that now it's chaired by the Prime Minister. At the time we established it, it was chaired by the President himself. And it included all the service chiefs, and it included the Defense Minister, that was myself, the Finance Minister, that was Shahid Hamid, the Interior Minister, Umar Afridi, the Prime Minister himself, Malik Miraj Khalid Saab. And after the first meeting, I got a call from the Air Chief, Abbas Khatak. And he said, sir, have you written the minutes? So I said, no, the Defense Secretary is writing the minutes. Is there anything particular that you want inserted in the minutes? And he said, no, I thought I'd make it easier for you. Why don't you simply write that in the meeting, the DGISI, he made his presentation, and then the Finance Minister made his presentation, and then you, sir, you made your presentation, and then the President of Pakistan made his presentation. And the Army Chief was pleased with all four presentations. So I told this to General J.K. and Jahangir Karamit, and he laughed a bit weakly, and he said, well, you know, Abbas Khatak will have his little joke, etc. He wasn't too pleased about it. But then why I'm telling the story is that 2 years back, I was head of a PILDAT delegation. PILDAT is the Pakistan Institute of Legislative Development and Transparency. And we were given 3.5, 4 hours time by the present Army Chief to discuss various issues relating to national security. And at the end of the meeting, I narrated this story to him. And he was surrounded by his senior generals, and they all had a good laugh. And then I said, the reason I've told you the story is to ask you a question. Are things any different today? And they all kept quiet, laughed a bit. And then as we were going out, he took my arm and he said, you know, my father was a lawyer. I said, that's interesting. My father was an army officer. So he said, yes, I know. I said, I also know that your father was a lawyer. So he said, oh, about that question you asked, perhaps things are not all that different. So this is actually something that is a continuing feature of our system. Not recent, not the last 20 years, way back. It started in 1953. I don't know, Memon Sahab, how much time I've got left? Another 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let me tell you one or two things about my tenure as governor. One was, of course, the Queen's visit during that time, and my wife was a lady in waiting all 6 days, and she was the extent of planning for her visit was quite remarkable. A team came from the palace, Buckingham Palace, 3 months in advance, and they went over the program with me, which was most of it was centered in Lahore, literally minute by minute. And they wanted the CVs and the photographs, not just of myself and my wife and the senior officers, down to the last guard and waiter and everyone. Why? Because she wanted to know their background and to be able to greet each one of them by name, which she did. She didn't just get this data, she actually studied it. And then she was a remarkably easy person to talk to. She put you at ease, and we chatted about family. It was the first visit abroad after the death of Diana and the difficulties of in-laws and things like that. And she was very interested in knowing what had caused the differences between Legari and Benazir. And then this is something actually that I narrated to the BBC. My wife and I narrated to the BBC, and was formed part of her interview when she crossed Queen Victoria's record of the longest serving monarch. She was very interested in carpets, and she got gifts of carpets from the President, the Prime Minister, and myself. But she also wanted to buy a carpet. So after the dinner in the Lahore fort, I had the dining room emptied, and I invited 2 of the best top carpet manufacturers in the country to lay out the carpets in the dining room. And when we got back from the banquet in the fort, I told her, ma'am, I have a surprise for you, and I took her to the dining room. And her eyes lit up, and she took off her shoes, and in her stockinged feet, she walked up and down each one of the carpets, and finally came to one. And I said, I was very surprised by this. And she said, you can only get the feel, the quality of the carpet, you feel the pile through your feet. And that's why I'm walking barefoot, if you like, on these carpets. And she selected a particular one. And she said to me, Governor, can you ask the price, which I did. And I converted it into sterling. And there was a raised eyebrow. This is something I'll never forget. She said, Governor, do you think we can haggle? So I said, certainly, ma'am. I'll do the bargaining for you, and I promise you I'll get you a royal bargain, which of course I did. But I will narrate the story that, here was the probably the richest woman in the world, but very conscious about the fact that she should get the right price for whatever she was purchasing. At the other end of the scale, my father's last posting was in Iran. And in 1973, there were floods. And my mother decided to have a fun fair to raise funds for the flood affected. Success of which was assured when Empress Faradiba agreed to come. When the Empress came, or the business community came, or the courtiers came, she went from stall to stall, praising the thing, and whatever she praised was immediately purchased by one or the other courtier. And at the end, she took off her bracelet and said, I'm auctioning this for raising funds for the flood affected. And the bidding went on and on and on until she raised the hand and she said, stop. And they had a complicated system by which each time somebody made a second bid, the amount that he had bid previously was added on. So it took a little time to calculate whose collective bids, so to speak, was the highest. And when it was, that gentleman crawled up to her and started praising her, praising her, praising her. And he wouldn't stop, and nor did she stop him. So my mother asked the translator standing next to her, okay, what is he saying? So the translator said, ma'am, what he's saying is that, Majesty, why did you ask us to stop? The amount that I have bid, the value of the amount that I have bid is less than the value of the dust under your feet. So royalty is of all types. That royalty was, of course, Arya Meher was 3 years later. He had to flee and then couldn't find any place for himself and his wife. Finally, he was given refuge by Sadat and died in Egypt. So great to be a royal, but I think probably the British model have got it right. They have survived. Others have not, or most of the others have not. Finally, I want to give you a flavor of a different world altogether. The only time that I accompanied Mia Nawaz Sharif on a foreign tour was when he took me to Brunei and Singapore. Brunei we went to first. That was a tourist holiday. We were entertained by the Sultan and the most expensive palace in the world, and in a throne room in which there was a Persian carpet. I've never seen a larger one or a more beautiful product. And then we were also taken to the Disneyland in his capital and so on. That visit was like that. And from there we flew to Singapore, and that was something else again. First off, when we got there, it was as usual, a reasonably large delegation. We were told by our ambassador that he has been informed by the Singapore government that their budget cannot bear the expenditure of more than 12 of us as their guests. The others will have to pay for themselves, or the government of Pakistan will have to pay for them. At that time, as now, the Singapore budget was, with a population of 5 million, was 50% more than that of the whole of Pakistan. But as I said, we can't bear the expenditure of more than 12 state guests from Pakistan. Then we, amongst others, we met Lee Kuan Yew. He was no longer the prime minister, but he was still the senior advisor to the Singapore government. And Lee Kuan Yew said that over the last 35 years, our top priority has been to provide accommodation to each and every one of our citizens. We have finally accomplished that task. And simultaneously, we have solved our population problem because we gave absolute priority to families with 2 children only. Even if there was a third, no priority, only to families with 2 children. And as a result, 35 years ago, as many as 6 were being born in one family. Now it's down to 2. The average is down to 2. We provided accommodation, and we've solved our population problem also. And now we have just completed a national debate on what to do with our reserves, which are growing all the time. And those reserves, we are now going to spend on building an underground system in the whole of our island, crisscrossing the island to solve our transport problem, transport water. And that will take us another generation. But as we did with our housing, we'll succeed here also. At the end of our visit, in the airport ceremonies, I was standing next to Sheikh Rashid, who, of course, is again a minister. And I turned to him and I said, Sheikh Saab, what impressions have you taken from this visit? So he said, Governor Saab, please tell, I know that Mia Saab listens to you more than he listens to any of us. Please tell him not to bring us to places like Singapore. I was really surprised. I said, Sheikh Saab, why ever not? So he said, it's okay for you. You would go back to governor's house, but I have to go with him to Islamabad. And he will be telling me and all the others, do like the Singaporeans do. And the fact is, we can't. We just can't. And I think, Memon Saab, on that note, having probably exhausted more than the time that you gave me, I'll stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was excellent speech. And we are honored to have you with us. And we look forward to more interaction with you. And when you write another book, we offer to launch it also. Maybe by that time, COVID-19 is on one side, and we would do it in person so that you can come back to Karachi, which was a city where you grew up. With these words, I would request the Vice President, Kaleem Faruqi, to offer a vote of thanks. Kaleem Faruqi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Governor Saab, it was what a, taking us down the memory lanes, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the generation of my father, and I've heard a lot what you said, introducing the likes of Mr. Moin Afzal, who must be knowing my father, being a finance secretary. My father was associated with the State Bank. Imtiazi Saab ka naam liya, apne S.K. Dehlvi Saab ka naam liya, Miraj Khalis Saab ka, Shahid Bukhari Saab. But these are the people who have, we have seen them working. We have seen the results coming out by the discussions, by the meetings. I hope it carries on, but we need people who have been serving Pakistan, taking on the responsibility, taking the things forward with their views. And then you had people who would listen to you. What has happened is something that we all sit back and try to see what exactly is happening. There were times where, you have narrated, I've gone through, I've just scanned through the book, and it's a book that I bought extra copies. I'll put one in the Sindh Club. You have mentioned about grammar school. I'm a grammarian myself. Those were the days, Governor Saab. Like the President said, we are looking forward to you visiting Karachi, where we can do the launching in a better, manner. And thank you so much for the insight that you have provided. And I'll go through the book. I've just received it this morning. I've scanned through it, and I know it's going to be a very interesting read. Thank you again for your time, and thank you for all that you have said about what happened while you were in charge of things in Pakistan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. Mr. Memon, anything you want to add before we close the meeting?
No, just words of thanks to Moin Afzal Saab and Shahid Hamid Saab, and we look forward to being in touch with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The meeting ends here. I close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.